You know, breathing feels so simple, right? Automatic, effortless. But have you ever stopped to think about the incredible physics at play with every single breath you take? It's this beautiful symphony of pressure, volume, and tension. So let's pull back the curtain and break down the amazing science that keeps us going.
All right, here's our game plan. We'll start with the basic mechanics of how we breathe. Then we'll dive into a tricky physics problem called the law of Laplace, tackle airway resistance, and then get to the main event, gas exchange. And to wrap it all up, we'll see how this all connects to real-world clinical situations.
So first up, the engine of our respiration. Now, here's a common misconception. Your lungs don't actively suck in air. Nope, breathing is actually a really clever mechanical process. It's all about changing the volume of your chest to create pressure differences that literally push and pull air in and out.
And this right here, this slide shows the stars of the show. Your main breathing muscle is the diaphragm, that big dome-shaped muscle right at the base of your chest. And working right alongside it are the intercostal muscles, tucked in between your ribs. Together, they act like this powerful, flexible pump. So how does this pump work? Well, to breathe in, your diaphragm contracts, pulling down and flattening out. This makes your chest cavity bigger, which causes the pressure inside to drop, and boom, air rushes in to fill the space. Then, to breathe out, it's actually incredibly efficient. The muscles just relax. The chest volume gets smaller, pressure goes up, and air is gently pushed out. It's a really elegant passive system when you're at rest.
Okay, so we've moved air into the lungs. Simple enough, right? Well, not so fast, because now, when we zoom in to the microscopic level, inside the millions of tiny air sacs called alveoli, we run into a huge physical challenge, surface tension. And this whole problem is governed by something called the law of Laplace. Now, don't get hung up on the formula. What it basically tells us is that the pressure inside a bubble is inversely proportional to its radius. So what does that actually mean for us? It means that smaller alveoli should have a way higher internal pressure than larger ones. Think about two balloons connected together, one big and one small. The little, high-pressure balloon would just instantly empty into the bigger one. That's a huge stability problem for our lungs. So really think about that for a second. If the pressure in all the tiny little air sacs is way higher than the big ones, wouldn't all the air just rush out of the small ones and cause them to collapse? How on earth do our lungs prevent this catastrophic failure from happening with every single breath?
Well, the answer comes from a biological superhero called surfactant. It's this amazing substance made by the alveolar cells themselves, and its job is to crush surface tension. But here is the truly brilliant part. It works better in smaller alveoli. It reduces the tension more in the small sacs than in the big ones. And that amazing trick equalizes the pressure across all the alveoli, no matter their size, keeping them all stable and preventing that collapse. It's just a perfect biological solution to a really tricky physics problem.
All right, so we've stabilized the alveoli. That's one problem solved. But the air still has a long journey to get there, through this massive branching network of tubes. And that journey isn't exactly frictionless. We have to talk about airway resistance.
And this is the part that is absolutely crucial to understand. Look at this relationship. Resistance is inversely proportional to the radius to the fourth power. That little r to the fourth changes everything. It means if you cut the radius of an airway in half, just in half, you don't double the resistance. You increase it by 16 times. It's a massive exponential impact from what seems like a tiny change.
And this illustrates that point perfectly. On the left, you've got a normal, wide-open airway. Air flows smoothly, easily, low resistance. But look what happens on the right. When that same airway gets just a little bit narrower, that smaller radius causes resistance to skyrocket. It becomes incredibly difficult to move air. This is the exact physical crisis that's happening inside the lungs during an asthma attack.
Okay, deep breath. We've overcome surface tension, we've managed airway resistance, the air has finally arrived in the alveoli. And now we get to the whole reason we do any of this, the grand finale of this entire process, getting that life-giving oxygen into our blood and getting the waste product, carbon dioxide, out.
Take a look at this diagram. This is that critical interface. The walls of the alveoli are almost unimaginably thin, and they're wrapped in this dense, web-like network of tiny blood vessels called capillaries. This spot right here, the alveolo-capillary membrane, is where all the action happens. So what drives the exchange? It's not some active pump. It's just simple, silent diffusion. And it's all dictated by pressure.
As you can see in the table, the partial pressure of oxygen in the air you just breathed in is way higher than it is in the blood that's showing up at the lungs. So, naturally, oxygen just flows down that steep gradient from high pressure to low, right into the blood. And the exact opposite is true for carbon dioxide. It flows out. And the most amazing part? This entire vital exchange happens in less than a second.
The rule book, if you will, for this whole process is something called Fick's law of diffusion. And it tells us that to get fast, efficient exchange, you need 3 key things: a huge surface area, which our millions of alveoli provide, a big pressure difference, and a really, really thin membrane for the gases to cross. When you think about it, the design of the lung isn't just good, it's a masterpiece of evolutionary engineering, perfectly optimized to max out every single variable in this law.
Now, understanding all these physical principles isn't just some academic exercise. It is absolutely essential, because when this elegant physics goes wrong, you get lung disease. It's a tragic story of physics failing.
So let's connect the dots. Remember that R to the 4th problem? In asthma, that becomes a terrifying reality. The airways constrict, resistance skyrockets, and every breath becomes a struggle. And in a disease like emphysema, the delicate walls of the alveoli are literally destroyed. That's a direct attack on Fick's law. You lose that precious surface area for gas exchange, and the body is essentially starved of the oxygen it so desperately needs.
So you see, the lung is this masterpiece of physical engineering, operating on this incredibly delicate balance of volume, pressure, tension, and diffusion. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other systems in our bodies rely on such precise, unforgiving physical laws just to keep us alive? Think about the electrical timing of the heart, or the fluid dynamics of our blood vessels. It's amazing stuff.